This is the 007 Debriefings. I'm Intelligence Officer Wiz.
And I'm Weapons Specialist Zero.
Zero. How you doing this week?
Doing all right.
All right. Just nothing? You're not going to give anything to work with here? Not like, oh, there's a fire in my office and everything was burned down and yet the evidence that I had is not there, so I'm good? Or, oh, this person at work really is annoying the shit out of me and I'm just about had it, and I don't know what I'm about to do, but there's only one thing that really calms me down, and my therapist says not to do it, and I can't stand it. Huh? Nothing? You're not going to give me anything? You know how this works?
Sometimes a quiet quartermaster's division is the best thing ever.
That is true. That is very true. I don't know why I'm poking the bear. Anyway, we are here to discuss the cinematic adventures of one James Bond. This week, Skyfall. Skyfall is, along with Casino Royale, to be one of the best Bond films ever made. So I want to ask you, you watched this film before this week. Was that your opinion as well before coming into this, or do you have another opinion based on that?
Yeah, I lucked out with a family friend just going, hey, we're going to see it in IMAX at like one of those studio movie grill type establishments.
Yeah.
So I was just like, all right, fantastic. And what a movie. Holy shit.
Yeah. The visuals of this movie are outstanding. That is like the one thing about this film that I just could not get over at times. And watching this was like, wow, this film is beautiful. So why don't we get into our mission objectives? We're going to discuss certain elements of a James Bond film, and we're going to do it by piece. So let's start off with 007, which is James Bond, played by Daniel Craig.
It's kind of interesting because he's a bit off of his leash, to say the least. Mostly because he's sort of kind of playing outside the rules in some cases, especially when things get a little weird towards the beginning when M just kind of clears him for duty. She's like, yeah, you're fine. Just, go back out there. It's going to be fine. It's the one time Bond's cautiousness sort of comes up for once, and he's just like, are you telling me something I don't know? And she's like, no, everything's fine. And caution is a rare thing to see out of Bond, especially the Daniel Craig Bond, because he's just kind of scraps things together. That's just how he is. So to see him have an ounce of caution was kind of an interesting take on this. In this movie, he's also a little bit playful too, because he and Eve Moneypenny have a lot of back and forth when they have scenes with each other, and it's actually kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you were not a fan of Casino Royale, Skyfall is probably going to be the movie that you watch and go, oh, okay, this is where the Daniel Craig Bond is like the Bond most that I am used to. The playfulness, the charm, the sharp, humorous wit, the confidence. This is where Craig plays that Bond character to that sense. But I think it's like this because the first two movies is him getting his feel in and trying to mold himself into that. I think that's why a lot of people seem to really like this one, because yes, it is a little bit different than the other Bonds in a certain sense, but it does incorporate more of those elements that people are used to. Because to a lot of people, when it comes to films and everything, they want to be entertained, and when they want to be entertained, they want to be familiar with what they're being entertained by. Not a lot of people like surprises and something that's wildly different from what they're used to. And I think in this sense, Bond is basically utilizing the elements of previous Bonds to this character. That said, they try to make some differentiations with this Bond by saying, oh, he's beaten up, he's too old, he's missed a step, maybe he should retire. And it's odd because, I don't know about you, except for the scenes where he hasn't shaved, he doesn't look that old.
He looks a little grizzled, but old is not the word I would use.
Yeah. For like the first act of the film, he hasn't shaved. He's just basically has that grizzled, when you're trying to grow a beard and it's kind of like that stubbleness. Like that's what he has in this. I forgot about this part. When watching this going, oh yeah, I remember this. And then it goes into the scene with Moneypenny shaving him, which I think we've discussed at a certain point with that scene. you're right about one thing. The playfulness is there. I think the confidence is there. So if you are somebody who did not like that Casino Royale portrayed him, Skyfall would probably be the one that you'd want to jump into because it has Craig as that Bond.
It's just kind of funny with the whole like old thing being just tossed around. It's just like, damn it, guys, Bond is not old. He's grizzled.
Yeah. Like when they were saying, "Oh, you've missed a step. Oh, you're too old." It's like, fucker got shot. What do you want? What you do? And he doesn't look old at all. Like it's like he's in great shape. If you could call him old, and yet you want me to believe that Roger Moore was still in good fighting shape in some of the films he was in, come on, you're stretching a little bit here. So, yeah. But I liked Craig in this, but I will say one thing that I still find a little disappointing, and it's that I don't think there is much depth to this character still. Again, this has come from Casino Royale, where there was a lot of depth and a lot of things that differentiate this Bond to others. It just seemed like they tried a little too hard to smooth out those edges to turn him into the classic Bond that I think a lot of old school fans wanted. I don't mind pleasing the old school fans, but I really liked what they did with Casino Royale, and it seems like they're just kind of ironing that stuff out.
He's a good Bond. There's not really much in the sake of development in his character and everything. So anyone who's expecting kind of something to surpass Casino Royale, you're not going to get it.
All right, Zeros, let's get into the villain, which is Raoul Silva, played by Javier Bardem.
Silva's a villain? My god. He is just a smarmy little smartass. Mm-hmm. Javier Bardem just really plays it up so well.
Yes.
Just throughout the movie, I was just like, God, I hate Silva. God! If you're wanting a Bond villain that just really gets the instinctual hate going, Javier Bardem plays Silva so well. It's just fantastic because, like, yeah, just every time he just kind of shows himself to be a little smarmy smartass, he's got the one up on Bond and everything, and it's always kind of funny too because just he'll kind of show off and say, I don't think you're up to form. I don't know how you're a star agent and things like that. It's just kind of one of those things that just so interesting to see, just that he really, really, really just plays into just kind of like the cheeky and smarmy sort of villain.
Yeah, I agree. Like, he's very bombastic, charming, ruthless. Bardem as Silva is very scene-stealing. He's loud, he's calculated. I think he's the best character of the film. But what is interesting about this character is that there is one villain he reminds me of, and I think you're going to laugh when you hear this. He reminds me of Max Zorn in A View to a Kill.
Ah, that's a good callback.
Yeah, but again, what makes this so good and what made Zorn so bad is ironically almost the same thing. Because of how loud, obnoxious, brilliant, deadly he is and how he chews the scenery, Bardem does a really good job in this performance, making him much more menacing and calculated, whereas with Walken, he made Zorn to be a little cartoon character. But if Bardem went one octave too high, that's exactly what could have happened in this one. I think that Bardem just had the right amount of charm and cunning to make Silva feel believable as well as highly entertaining in this movie. The other thing that is really good about Silva is the writing in this. And I'm not just talking about the character writing, because like, if you really think about the character of Silva, he is kind of one note, and it's really Bardem's performance that makes it so good. There's an interesting aspect to this character that I think we should point out. It really encapsulates just how bad M was at her job. He really is just a character that is a retribution of M's terrible leadership. It's almost like this character was created to basically right the wrongs that M did, but in probably one of the worst ways, which almost makes you feel sorry for him in a really weird way, and it works incredibly well.
As a retribution character, it's most certainly interesting. You go from kind of hating him, from going, oh god, just a smarmy little villain, just he's always got the one up on Bond and M and everything, and then just when you see him just kind of captured in the isolation prison, and he just kind of goes into just the story of what happened and everything, because when M rather goes off and says, oh yeah, nothing important, just he tried to get one up on the Chinese and, you know, just he got caught, so I gave him up and I got back some agents back as a favor. Fine by me. On the initial take, it's just like, okay, yeah, sounds like she just made a deal out of the pragmatics of the situation, so whatever. It isn't until he kind of goes off and kind of describes the pain and suffering he went through. You're just like, that's kind of fucked up. He wasn't able to kill himself, but man, oh man, he went through a lot of suffering because M turned him over because she was like, all right, you caught him. All right, we'll give him up. Whatever.
I think some will also look at that situation and go, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But none of the other M's ever did that. At least we don't know that with the other M's in this. And there's really only been, 2 other M's that have been in the Bond films. But, she's really the only one that was that cold and that ruthless. And yet, if you look back at M in other Bond movies, she's also a poor judge of character. We've talked about with The World's Not Enough, Die Another Day. Honestly, I think she's really just bad at her job. And this is just a culmination of how many times she screwed up and basically Silva putting an end to it. It's really strange that, I think this is really the only Bond film that I actually felt like, yeah, I think he's kind of justified. It's really weird. Is there any other Bond villain where you felt like, bro's got a point?
Not that I can think of offhand.
No.
I mean, Jaws has sort of a redemption saga, but it's just that, a redemption saga.
Yeah, essentially. Well, if the redemption saga is you get a girlfriend, I mean, what better redemption
Well,
saga?
more like his humanity gets him, and
Sure.
he's like, yeah, I should probably help out Bond.
Yeah, all right. So next section would usually be Bond Girl, but unless we count M as the Bond Girl, I don't think there is one in this movie. Can you imagine, the end sequence where Bond is sleeping with M, and he's like, I think I've grown an edible complex to Mom. Oh, 007, put that away.
Oh, God, that would be terrible.
It would be terrible, but you know what? That's something Brosnan Bond would probably do. So we'll move on to spy action.
This one, there's a lot of action. I don't really think there's much on just kind of the spy stuff other than trying to get one on the sniper in Hong Kong and then sort of boarding up, trying to find a way to board up on the boat and everything. There's not really much on the spy and espionage stuff. If anyone's looking for some more of the spy heavy stuff, this is probably not the movie for it.
Yeah, I agree with you. The spy stuff is really not there. But I think this film is about, can Bond still do the job? And a lot of the questions are all going to be physical. He hurt his shoulder, he's too old, this and that. I'm not surprised that it's more action-based in this movie. But man, these action sequences are good. These are some of the best action sequences that I have seen in a Bond film, period. These are amazing. And the way that they look in certain sequences is also outstanding. The first half of the film, you have the fight scene in the office building, which is full of glass. The colorful images that are on the billboard that are shining into the scene. Absolutely gorgeous scenes. And then you have the scene that's in the casino as well that is really stunning to look at. Stunts are really well done. I think the action is really, really good in this one.
Yeah, the action's fantastic. The first introduction's action sequence, the fight through the city that goes onto the train, that was just one hell of a kinetic sequence. Just so much movement. It was just one hell of a way to start the movie off. The action just gets even more and more amped up as you get to the end, and the last stand sequence at the end, holy shit, that was insane.
Oh yeah, definitely. The final sequence in Scotland is really well thought out and entertaining, and it adds an emotional heft to it that I don't think any of the other Bond films have ever had. And that mainly has to do with what happens at the end of that sequence and the emotional resonance that it comes out with it as well. I also want to point out, too, this film does a ton of callbacks. It does a lot of nostalgia baiting, and it has a lot of scenes where it reminds you of different Bonds. And I think a lot of them are really effective. There are a good amount of them that are really good, but I think the best one is at the end, where you are at what looks to be the original office space where M was in Dr. No.
Yeah, it had the padded plate both on the front and the back of the door, and I was just like, all right, we're getting back to the office.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting stuff.
It felt right, too. It just was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense to have that there. It didn't feel like really baity in a bad way. It was like, this is what I'm used to. This is nice. I like this. I really like the action in this film. How about you?
And the action stuff is just exquisite. Oh my god.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's get into the theme song and opening credits, which is Skyfall, written by Adele and Paul Epworth, performed by Adele.
This one is another fantastic one on the books, and I love Adele. Just she's a fantastic singer.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I'm a fan of Adele too, so that's why I really like the song, but I don't know if I like the song because it's Adele or that it's a good song. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, this is really good, but I really like Adele, so maybe I'm not the right person to actually comment on this. Yeah, but this is also a song that fits really well with the movie. It's really about loyalty and standing tall and fighting for a greater purpose, which in some ways is good, in some ways is bad in the movie because it blinds everybody in the movie as well. I like the song, I agree. The opening credits is not bad, but not very memorable. When I was writing my review last night, I had to recall again what the opening credits were like, and they're fine. They're dark, they're brooding.
I mean, I can barely really remember it, to be honest. It's not terrible, but it's not memorable either. I think really the most memorable thing is just Adele singing the Bond song, really.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the actual opening credit sequence is not really that memorable at all, so anyway. All right, Zero, conclusion time.
I would say this is a mission accomplished, mostly because just the sum of its parts are just fantastic overall. You've got just excellent action. You've got a villain that is just an absolute delight to hate, but also just he kind of throws the Uno reverse card at you at the end, and you're just like, wow, he's kind of fucked up and am fucked about. Jesus. It's a unique dynamic that we don't really see in the Bond movies very much. That's kind of cool to see. The lack of a Bond girl is actually not a bad thing, because overall the plot seems to come stronger because of just the fact that you don't have a love scene sort of kind of taking away from the story of the action. Some people may lament it, but I think this is one movie that is actually probably better without a romance sort of sequence.
Yeah, I agree with the lack of a Bond girl. I think having one shoehorned in there would have been lesser in this one. And honestly, it would be against the character that Bond is when it comes to Craig's Bond. I also say mission accomplished to Skyfall. I think it does some things incredibly well, but one thing not so much. But Skyfall is essentially a throwback to the old Bond formula. It has a lot of the elements and callbacks from previous Bonds that you might remember if you've watched all the other films, but it also incorporates the Craig Bond very well into that, keeping that character the way it is while fitting it with the standard formula. You've said it, and I'll say it again, the villain is excellent, and Javier Bardem does a really good job with this character. Having the right amount of scenery chewing and charisma to make the character just a great character to watch. My only problem is there's not enough depth to Bond. Like, Bond in this is just basically, well, you know what happened in the first two, right? Yeah, kind of the same, except he's old. Maybe he's too old. Maybe he's too banged up. Maybe he's too banged up and bold. I don't know. Like, all right, fine. You learn, like, by the second act of the film, like, no, he's not too old. Or M screws up again by getting too attached, which is kind of unlike this M, but oh well, what can we do? This is a great time. I thought this was a very entertaining movie. It's a pure visual spectacle when it comes to the action sequences, and I think Bardem is one of the best villains of the entire franchise. So, Zero, mission accomplished for you?
Yep.
Mission accomplished for Skyfall. Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. Thank you for listening to this review. If you want to know what we're reviewing in the next couple days, you can look on the screen right now to see what's coming up next. If you liked what you heard, go ahead and leave a like on this video. If you want to discuss your opinion on the film or the review itself, please leave a comment. And if you want to hear more, subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for listening. I will talk to you next time.